but they have right on the Keddie28.com website. I mean, we're going to go to serious conspiracy land because they're making some bold claims here. They list here all are directly involved in the murders, naming Nina Meeks, Sheila, Richard Wade Loon, Martin Sharp, Bo Bede, D. Lake, and some guy named Tony G. And also, I guess they have a serious question here. Why did Sheila Sharp help in the slaughter of her family? Why did Sheila Sharp send Tina home from number 27 to be murdered? Because she was at the neighbor's cabin and then she went home. There are some crazy questions here. Alright, so we're going down deep into Mindshock territory. The Keddie28.com theory here. I mean, this is getting really, really crazy. So let's read what they have on this here. The morning of April 12th, 1981, Glenn Sue Sharp and her kids, Tina and John, and John's friend Dana Wingate were brutally murdered inside house number 28 in Keddie, California. Dozens peripherally involved in the case had motive, if not opportunity. Yet law enforcement immediately zeroed in on their prime suspects, then seemingly inexplicably ignored them. Yes, this case was intentionally made to grow cold. Why was Marty Smart, the main suspect, the drug-running local sheriff's close friend? Why did an enforcer from the mob, Bo Bede, move in with Smart just prior to the murders? Why were corrupt DOJ BOCC agents immediately assigned to this rural case? Why did both the DOJ and Sheriff Doug Thomas skate these key suspects while law enforcement noted they were lying and Marty failed his polygraph test? So this is stating that he failed the test, and apparently the sheriff told everybody he passed it. Why was Marty's then-wife, Marilyn Musgrove, a key conspirator and fellow murderer, not arrested? Why did law enforcement agencies conspire to cover up this case? What were the killers involved in that caused law enforcement to protect them and play CYA? The following participated in the planning and or execution of these murders: Sheila Sharp, Glenna Meeks, Marilyn and Marty Smart, Bo Bede, DJ Lake, Wade and Richard Meeks. He also lists names here. I don't know if they've been publicly named, so I'm just going to go with their first names and their initials. So John Blaine G, and then Tony G, a different G last name. More to follow. So the case synopsis listed here on the site. Part 1 background. In November 1980, Glenn Sue Sharp, known as Sue, moved her family from a tiny, cramped trailer in Quincy, California, to the comparably large 3-bedroom near derelict wood frame house number 28 in nearby Keddie. A Navy wife who'd been stationed around the country, she and her 5 kids had left their Connecticut home when Sue separated from her abusive husband, James Sharp, in 1979. They moved across the U.S., visiting family and old neighbors before settling in Quincy that July, where they rented the trailer her brother had just vacated. Despite Keddie being a run-down, low-rent railroad town long in decline, the kids had more room in the old house, and their yard was the forest, a nearby stream, and Western Pacific Railroad tracks. Johnny, the oldest at 15, took an unfinished room downstairs off the small utility area in the partial basement. With no internal stairwell or bathroom, he used the back stairs or front door to access the main cabin, but was otherwise quite happy with his relative independence. The younger boys, Rick 10 and Greg 5, shared a bedroom at the front of the cabin, adjacent to the living room, while Sue and her youngest daughter, Tina, shared the rear bedroom opposite the kitchen. In mid-February, the eldest daughter, Sheila, 14, joined the family after giving birth to a baby in Oregon, which was swiftly put up for adoption by Sue. At that time, Sue slept in the twin bed while the girls shared the queen, or sometimes Sue slept on the pull-out couch in the living room by the TV. Times were hard in Plumas, and they always have been, and Sue had to make ends meet with the $250 she received from the Navy, which just covered her rent, food stamps and other social welfare, and the stipend she received for being enrolled in CETA, a federal education program of the era. Sue had been described as a quiet, reserved woman who primarily kept to herself. An FBI document dated a month after the murders depicted her much as her neighbors had. She was not a fancy dresser and was best described by casual associates and neighbors as a loner. Sharp had one close girlfriend, a neighbor woman with the last name of Meeks. Sharp's only known source of income came from her position as a CETA worker, wherein she was paid to attend school, the Feather River Community College, where she was to learn a business trade. She was described as being a good student who studied hard and obtained good grades, but who was also a loner and who did not participate in social gatherings such as coffee breaks. She had no other known source of income other than a $250 a month allotment check from the U.S. Navy via her husband. Prior to her death, Sharp had no local criminal record, nor was she known to local authorities. Sue still managed to date with some frequency, and while her romantic ambitions remain unclear, several of her boyfriends simply seemed at odds with her background and temperament. Plumas is a county of disparate social and economic classes, a place where the American dream went to die decades ago. Opportunities to better oneself, much less climb the ladder, are slim to none. Given the pool of eligibles, Sue was not exactly fending off prosperous beaus who appealed to her sensibilities. Religion and drinking have been cited as reasons she broke off relationships, and while Sue was no teetotaler? I don't even know what that is. She apparently didn't fancy too much of either. A teetotaler is someone who never drinks alcohol. Teetotalism is the practice or promotion of total personal abstinence from alcoholic beverages. Okay. She apparently didn't fancy too much of either. One of her suitors proposed marriage on the first date. According to one report of questionable veracity and dubious intent, seemingly filed to divert attention, Sue was in a vitriolic and abusive relationship with a man shortly before her murder, climaxing in a loud argument in her front yard 6 weeks prior to the murder, filled with rage and coarse language. Yet another boyfriend was killed a month after the murders while being chased from a bar by PCSO deputies. Okay. It's been claimed many key persons of interest either dated Sue, had their advances rebuffed by her, or were simply infatuated with her. Her most recent known boyfriend, Daryl, Dareyl, had been introduced to her a week prior to her death, and they spent much of time with each other in the ensuing days, either at his nearby trailer or at area bars playing pool and drinking beer. Their last date was 2 days prior to the crime, after which Daryl left Keddie to spend the weekend with family in Paradise, California. So apparently he had an alibi. Is Paradise... Wait, didn't we read earlier that Paradise was where one of these suspects went? Huh. Weird. Okay. Not this Daryl guy who apparently would have an alibi here in this case. On Sunday morning, April 12, 1981, Sheila Sharp woke up next door at cabin 27, where she'd spent the night with neighbors, the Seabolts. Having decided to attend church with them that morning at about 7:45, she went to her cabin 15 feet to the south to get her Sunday clothes. Upon opening the front door, she saw 3 bodies on the floor, the furthest away covered with a blanket. She also saw a knife on the floor between the doorway and the closest body, bent at such an angle she mistook it for an opened pocket knife. She ran, screaming, back to the Seabolts. Sheila and Mrs. Seabolt went to the nearest working phone across the street at the landlord's cabin, 25, and called the Plumas County Sheriff's Office. As PCSO dispatched a car to the scene, Sheila and Zonita Seabolt returned to 27 and, with the help of Zonita's son, Jamie, knocked on the boys' bedroom window. Jamie pulled 3 unharmed kids from that window: Greg, Rick, and neighbor Justin Smart, 12, who had spent the night at 28 on a sleepover. Jamie then went to the rear of 28, up the stairs, and inside through the back door, which was open or left ajar by the killers. After looking around and searching for survivors, he rejoined the others outside. Soon, PCSO squads would be on hand. Part 2, law enforcement arrived. The first member of law enforcement to arrive shortly after 8 a.m. was PCSO Deputy Hank Clement, who did a quick search of the cabin, confirming the murders. At 8:25, Sergeant Jerry Shaver arrived, and Clement, talking with a group of residents in front of 28, told him there appeared to be a triple murder. After Shaver and Clement entered the front door and reviewed the scene together, Shaver placed Clement on point in front of the cabin. Upon asking the dispatcher to inform Sheriff Sylvester Doug Thomas and sent out investigators. Sheriff Sylvester Doug Thomas and send out investigators. Shaver began interviewing witnesses. At approximately 8:30 a.m., PCSO's Don Stoy was called by dispatch and told to report to a triple homicide in Keddie. Also informed was Assistant Sheriff Ken Shanks. What a name. At 8:45, Don Davis, Sue's brother, arrived and met with Shaver in front of 28. Don gave Shaver details on Sue and the family, about her pending divorce and move from Connecticut. Davis also detailed how Sue's estranged husband, Jim, hadn't visited the family since November of 79, and how Sue refused to give Jim the new address or phone number after moving to Keddie. He supplied the names and ages of Sue's kids, then mentioned Sheila's baby, giving the baby's father's name and address, and mentioning he hung around the gaming arcade in East Quincy. Okay, so the plot's going to really thicken here. So Sheila's baby's father is from the general area in Quincy, but she was sent away to Oregon to have the baby. Okay, I mean, that might play a prominent role here in Keddie28.com's theory that she was involved in killing her own family here. I mean, this is dark stuff. When Shanks and Stoy arrived around 9:30 a.m., Clement was again inside 28 and came out to greet them. After a briefing from Shaver and Clement, Stoy and Shanks began photographing the crime scene and collecting evidence. Shaver returned to interviewing witnesses in the cabin's picket-fenced yard, while Clement was dispatched to do a cursory house-by-house welfare check of the area. PCSO went on investigating the crime scene for several days, and while all the crime scene reports aren't available, it's clear many reports don't match each other or the facts, and that Stoy's report, written to cover both his and Shanks's account of events, seems to have been doctored to indicate PCSO immediately understood something evidence shows they didn't realize for hours: Tina Sharp was missing. By noon, a California Department of Justice helicopter from Sacramento was hovering over Keddie, taking photographs, even capturing on film what appears to be the killers sneaking out of town the back way to avoid notice. What? Were either PA Crim or Harry Bradley, special agents for the Bureau of Organized Crime and Criminal Intelligence, on the chopper? Either way, 2 unreliable mafia agents were seemingly instantaneously on scene, distorting the facts and destroying any chance of arresting suspects or solving the case. So they were out there by noon. Interesting. Part 3, the bodies. In the front room of cabin 28 were 3 bodies. Closest and parallel to the front door, supine on the floor, was Johnny's corpse, his feet inches from the south wall and head nearest to the doorway. Inches away to his left lay the cheap table steak knife which Sheila had noticed. 2 feet away and parallel to Johnny's body lay that of Dana Wingate, a friend who was to sleep over at a 28 Saturday night. Laying prone, the head was barely resting on the corner of a cushion which had been removed from the couch. Adjacent to Dana's body was Sue Sharp's on its right side, with the head by the base of the couch and feet near Dana's left arm. Sue's body was covered with a blanket and sheet, later determined to have come from Tina's bed. Johnny's hands rested on his abdomen, taped tightly at the wrists with several loops of white cloth medical tape. His ankles were wrapped twice and tightly knotted with a white extension cord. The cord stretched neatly parallel to the base of the disturbed TV stand, then turned abruptly 90 degrees, leading to Dana's ankles where it was loosely looped once and knotted. Around one of Dana's hiking boots was one loop of medical tape, and then there was also half a loop of tape on his right boot, but the tape appeared to have been broken. Likewise, the tape around his wrists was broken, with the broken bands of tape connected only to his right wrist. The tape around the stronger Dana was also much wider than the tape binding the younger, smaller Johnny. Sue's ligatures were by far the most complicated. Her wrists and ankles were bound with narrow medical tape relatively loosely. Over the tape on her wrists was a tight loop of electrical cord knotted several times. Over that was another loop of stronger electrical cord knotted and connected to a third length of cord, which extended to and tightly looped around her ankles. Yet another length of wire superfluously tied her ankles together. The cord between her ankles and wrists was so taut her legs and knees were drawn together. She was also gagged with a bandana and her panties, which several lengths of medical tape applied on top of them. Part 4, The Murders. The following is the most complete and detailed account of what happened leading up to and during the Keddie murders. This is not told in ifs or maybes. I've studied this case for 15 years now and have had access since mid-2020 to all case files, interviews, recordings, etc. still known to exist. I have spent thousands of hours poring over every detail and assisted PCSO's S.A. Mike Gamberg during his tenure as lead investigator from 2014 until budgetary restraints forced the case to be mothballed again circa 2018. During that time, we worked together to prove many points, including several of my own theories and conclusions. A few of these are: Marty Smart and Sue Sharp were having an affair. Marilyn Smart was the key conspirator and instigator of the three main killers: Marilyn, Marty, and Bo. Kathy Beckley lied about giving the boys a ride home. She in fact reneged on her promise to do so, but eventually acquiesced and arranged for a friend to take them to Keddie. PCSO knew this in 1981, then buried it and lied about it for 30 plus years. Upon my sending Gamberg paperwork on the missing recordings of the phone call IDing the skull as possibly Tina's, he located the tape within a week. John Bubede had a lengthy criminal career within and without the Chicago outfit mafia. Bubede was protected by several factions of law enforcement. Bubede's military records were falsified. Signs indicate his death may also have been a fabrication. Wow. The Keddie murders are officially unsolved. Since July 2020, I've been poring over all the case files I hadn't yet seen, having been given full access by former lead investigator Mike Gamberg. I've also been in contact with the step-niece of the original sheriff, Doug Thomas, who has provided me his original case files and case notes dating back to 1981. The main line of lies surrounding the Keddie case, those most often regurgitated online and in podcasts, is that Marty Smart and Bo Bede murdered Sue Sharp because Sue was counseling Marty's wife, Marilyn, nicknamed Loon by me for her ceaseless stream of insane BS, to leave the supposedly abusive Marty. That Tina was taken alive from 28 and killed later. Worse, that Tina was the target for white slavery. All of these are clearly lies, all of which were knowingly spread by several of the original investigators within PCSO and California Department of Justice. Here's the short and sweet version that is absolutely true. Sue was not counseling Marilyn Smart. Sue was, however, having an affair with Marty. Marilyn found out around mid-February to March of 1981. As a result, Marty was kicked out of their house, number 26, and moved to Reno and lived with his old friend John Boo Bede. They did not meet at the VA. They were both carnival workers and scammers who'd known each other for years. Bo was in Reno because he'd been kicked out of Vegas by remnants of Sheriff Lamb's crew. Loon's MO was to hook up with a guy, cheat on him while bleeding him dry, then latch onto her new victim while leaving the husk of the last guy drifting in the wind. The last thing Loon would allow for is her man du jour to stray on her to let some other slag sleep with him. Marilyn wanted Sue dead. Loon was friends with Nina Meeks, Sue's supposed best friend, who was in fact her worst frenemy. Nina's son Richard was one of the kids screwing Sue's daughter Sheila. Wait a second. Pregnant at 13, the Meeks thought that the baby was Richard's and wanted the baby. Instead, Sue put the baby up for adoption. Richard and Nina Meeks wanted Sue dead. Wow. If this is true... Wow. Okay. If this is true, so Sue's supposed best friend's son is the one who is the father of Sheila's baby, allegedly. Obviously, we don't know that. Nina's other son, Wade, was 19 and was screwing 35-year-old Loon. Little did Wade know, but his best friend, Blaine G., was betting Loon too. Wade wanted Marty out of the picture. Loon wanted Marty out of the picture. Okay, this is turning into a really crazy soap opera now. Sheila hated her mother, hated Tina, hated John. She hates her family, period. Sue was a horrid mom, was rarely home, and left all the housework to the kids who were always running around town, shoeless and hungry, asking for food. Back when they were living in the tiny trailer at Claremont Trailer Park, Sheila and Tina would barricade themselves inside, locking the others out. Too small for 5 kids, most of them slept in a dirt floor shed Sue had built beside the trailer. Sue went through several boyfriends. One dumped her because she was such a bad mom. He met her when she was a dishwasher at the Elks Club in East Quincy. He'd often call her, but always the kids answered because she was never home. He'd see her kids occasionally in town because they were always unsupervised and wandering around. Sue was often at the backdoor bar. Barmaids recall her and Marty being there together a lot, as their affair was an open secret. Sheila gave birth to her baby girl in Oregon in early February 81, and Sue drove up to both get Sheila and put the baby up for adoption. This obviously angered Sheila and the Meeks family, enough for them to arrange to have Sue murdered. Sheila told the Meeks the baby was Richard's, but Dana also clearly feared the baby was his. What? Okay, I mean, how many love triangles are there here? I mean, these are just endless triangles if any of this stuff is true. I mean, the FBI statistics, again, it's hard to ignore them. Again, women who are met with foul play usually do so at the hands of someone known to them. Some kind of jealous lover, etc. This is really tough, though. This is really tough. Sheila wanted out of her family. I believe she thought the baby was her way out and that she'd be taken in by the Meeks. Instead, Sue put her baby up for adoption. Sheila wanted her whole family dead. Things come to a head by March, around the time Marilyn discovered the affair. Loon and the Meeks were great friends, and Nina Meeks was friendly with Sue but really wanted her dead over the baby. I believe Loon and Nina got together, and over commiserating about their multiple issues with Sue, they agreed on killing her. It would have been easy to get Sheila on board, as she wanted Mommy dead too. Marty was fired from his cook job at the lodge for poor performance and or dealing, and his former boss was also evicting him from House 26. Loon was able to get Marty involved in the murders by claiming she'd take him back if they eliminated Sue. Bo got involved because, hell, he didn't mind killing people. That was his business. Marty and Loon claimed they knew Justin was sleeping at 28 Saturday night, which makes it hard to explain why they would kill 4 people in a house they knew their son was sleeping in. As it turns out, Justin had slept both Friday and Saturday nights at 28. Yet Marty and Loon had no idea where he was. They didn't care. In a 2016 6.5-hour-long interview with FBI agents, Loon blurted out that they had no idea Justin was in 28 that night. That would actually make more sense, though, because why? Yeah. I mean, if that's true, that's really mind-shocking. Somehow, Sheila finagled her way into sleeping over next door at the Seabolts that night, a night Tina typically stayed there. Sheila, however, had never slept at 27 before. Very odd. The first night she sleeps there is also the same night she agreed to have her family slaughtered. Tina had spent most of the day with the Seabolts, and Sheila went over there around 5 p.m. They both had dinner at 27, while Justin, Rick, Greg, and Sue had frozen burritos for dinner. Around 8:30 p.m., Sheila went back home, gathered some bedding for the sleepover, and then left for good. Upon exiting 28, though, she managed to flip off the light switch just inside the front door without anyone noticing. Sue was lying on the couch facing the TV, and the front door was on the opposite wall to her, perfectly in line with her vision. Had Sue glanced up to bid goodnight to her daughter, she may have noticed Sheila flip the switch. Instead, she continued staring at a cheap black and white TV, engrossed in the latest episode of Love Boat, while her daughter set her up to be murdered. The boys, Rick 9 and Justin, who just turned 12 days prior, were also watching on the floor. This is around the time Greg, just 5, went to bed. That light switch not only controlled the front porch, but it was hardwired to a street lamp at the end of a yard arm attached to the tall fir tree at the front gate of 28. The yard arm hung out over the center of the Keddie's main street, illuminating the way for workers to get from the railroad station to the lodge. At one time, the contract between the RR and the owner of Keddie stipulated that the light had to remain on and that the lodge's coffee shop must remain open 24/7, 365 for the workers. By turning off the light, Sheila ensured the premises and surrounding environs of 28 were darkened so the killers could enter with far less likelihood of being seen. Not just that, she unscrewed the one bulb she could reach on the front porch just in case the switch turned back on. Sheila then returned to 27 and distinctly told Tina that Sue said they had to be home by 10 p.m. In other words, Sheila sent her own sister, her little angel as she'd say while pouring crocodile tears, back to 28 to be murdered. The stories about why Tina was told to go home vary wildly, but I believe Sheila set it up. I think she lied to Tina. Mom wants you to sleep at home tonight and you need to be there by 10. Sheila really wanted Tina to be in the middle of all she'd planned. It's up to speculation as to whether or not Sheila was supposed to be at 28 that night to assist, but it is perfectly within her sociopathic realm of behavior to chicken out. Bottom line, the killers were surprised to find Tina there instead of their co-conspirator, Sheila. Meanwhile, John and Dana were still trying to get home from an afternoon in Quincy. They'd hitched from Keddie into Q Saturday afternoon, heading to Dana's foster home. After asking for permission to sleep at 28 that night, they headed back towards Quincy shortly after 6 p.m. They'd arranged for a ride to 28 from Kathy Backley, the 27-year-old that 17-year-old Dana had been betting. Wow, is this a soap opera or what? Just another point to interject here. Is that a reason they might have taken Tina from the house if they just got confused and they didn't know if they were supposed to kill her because it's supposed to be Sheila? Would that be a reason? I don't know. Kathy lived in an apartment across from the Exxon behind the Chevron. She made up an excuse to renege on her promise of a ride home, so the boys went to the Exxon around 7 p.m. and tried hitching. With no luck, they kept going back to Kathy's to beg for a ride. They'd go through the fence by the Chevron, a shortcut, which is why witnesses saw them at Van Gas and the Chevron. They were traveling back and forth to Kathy's. After returning a few times, Kathy finally relented and arranged for a ride, so the kids hung out with her until their ride arrived. This is why eyewitness accounts of the boys hitching outside the Exxon ended around 9 to 9:30 p.m. I knew Kathy lied about why she reneged on her promise and surmised the boys wore her down once I got a fix on the true location of her apartment. Case files give wrong addresses miles from the Exxon. And told Mike Gamberg of my reasoning, and he looked into it. He not only confirmed that Kathy lied in 1981 and eventually arranged for them to get home by contacting a friend who took them, Kathy told Mike she'd lied in 81 because she was embarrassed and concerned about her illegal affair with underage Dana and didn't want to be seen with him. The person who gave John and Dana that last ride then confirmed by phone before Kathy had time to poison the well not just the ride home, but also what the killers lied about. The outside of 28 was not only unusually dark, but there was a dull glow coming from the living room window. This proved what I'd already deduced. Sue was asleep when John and Dana got home, but had left the bathroom light on, which acted as both a nightlight and a navigation light. This person dropped them off around 11 to 11:30 and got the hell out of Dodge because something about being there was creepy that night. This person also told PCSO all of this in 81, and PCSO buried it, so law enforcement continued to lie about how and when the boys got home, publicly stating that the crimes appeared to be a crime of opportunity, completely unplanned. Law enforcement, for 30 plus years, also claimed the boys probably either got a ride from their killers or walked in on the crimes as they were occurring. This they also knew to be complete pig dung. So many buried and falsified documents prove just the opposite. Hell, one look at the crime scene photos tells anyone with a brain this was planned. Poorly planned by idiots and a-holes, yes, but clearly planned just the same. This person, a bartender in nearby Greenville, also confirmed to Gamberg that Marty and Sue were having an affair. Marty and Sue would go there quite often, and Marty was skeezy in general, but especially so because he was jealous over Sue. Okay, hold on, let me recap here. So an individual who Dana's older girlfriend, or whatever, maybe not girlfriend, whatever, one of his lovers, the person she got to give them a ride was a bartender at a bar that Marty and Sue went to often. They went there often. So somehow she knows this bartender. Hold on, I gotta look up these populations. Okay, so I couldn't really find a population for Keddie in the 1980s, but in 2012, so in 2011, the population, according to worldpopulationreview.com, was 153. In 2012, it was 163. In 2013, it dropped to 73, back up to 89 in 2014, dropped to 41 in 2018, and is currently about 76. So basically, nobody lives there. So Quincy's population in 2010 was 1,728. So 1,879 during 2000. So perhaps there was more people there before, but either way, I mean, that's a population. So well over 1,000 people, and this so-called lover of Dana's just so happens to know the bartender in Greenville. So Greenville also over 1,000 population, 1,160 as of the year 2000. So over 1,000 people. I mean, I don't know. If the town wasn't as dead back in the 80s, is it possible there were a lot more people there? But either way, well over 1,000 people in Greenville, well over 1,000 people in Quincy, almost nobody in Keddie. But either way, Dana just so happens to have a lover who knows the bartender in a neighboring town who just so happens to be the mother the bartender who just so happened to witness in his bar the mother of John, Dana's friend here, and their neighbor, Marty Smart. Okay, does anybody else find that strange statistically? I mean, this is weird. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. It's really weird. Okay, so continuing on here, Marty and Sue would go there often, and Marty was skeezy in general, but especially so because he was so jealous over Sue. Mike was so elated about Kathy lying, but that I was also right about Marty and Sue having an affair, and that the impetus of the murders for Marty and Loon was really Loon's lust for blood revenge. That he immediately called me. It was a good day in the investigation for both of us, but I wanted further confirmation about Sue and Marty having an affair, which I've had time and time again. In all of PCSO's, DOJ's, and FBI's lies and cover-up, they never bothered to find out the movements of their prime suspects. Their only suspects, Martin Ray Smart, Severin John Bo Bede, and Marilyn Faye Smart. They never even claimed Loon, who was the main conspirator and killer inside 28, of being a suspect. Loon was the Charlie Manson of the 26 crowd, if you will. All we know about their movements on Saturday, other than dealer Marty being seen at a gaming arcade in EQ across from the Meeks house, is law enforcement and witnesses did place them at the bar, as visible as humanly possible, establishing their alibi. This, of course, law enforcement obfuscated and lied about as well. There were more false reports filed in this case than the number of shingles on 28's roof. Overdressed in three-piece polyester disco suits, Bo and Marty went the extra mile by wearing mirrored sunglasses at night inside a bar. I guess they're Corey Hart fans. All of this a full 3 years before Corey Hart made it into one of the stupidest hit songs of all time. Oh, wow. I totally threw that out without seeing that this guy referenced Corey Hart also. So he fact-checked me. So they couldn't have been Corey Hart fans because this was 3 years before his I Wear My Sunglasses at Night song. Wow. Okay, then. Loon wore a floor-length off-white gown. The garishly overdressed trio of murderers spent the entire night at a table right next to the dance floor, near the DJ from the local radio station hired that night to play records. Normally, the bar owner, Jack Brown, hired a band to play live on weekends, but not April 11th. Loon was on the dance floor most of the night, dancing with the soon-to-be ex-husband she despised. Sometimes Bo gave her a spin, but it was mostly Marty and Loon cutting a rug. Around 2010 to 2011, when first seriously looking into the case, I determined that Marty, Bo, and Loon created a joint alibi filled with the stupidest lies even an armchair detective like me could easily debunk from 1,000 miles away. It's so insanely insane, I coined it the Lunaby. And not just because the Lunaby also proves Marilyn was not only a key participant, but the instigator. Lunaby. The lies concocted by Marty, note by Marde, M-A-R-D-E, how Marty signed his name, fitting the French slang for expletive, synonym for manure. Bo, Marilyn, and a couple others, D. Lake, Mike Davis, Tony G., as a joint alibi for the night of the murders, called Lunaby because at the time I thought the murders were mainly Loon's idea. Okay, I don't know how I missed this, but apparently even Ranker.com listed D. Lake, who lived at the address that made the phone call to police about Tina's skull fragment. Lake was also a former vet like Smart and reportedly drove his buddy to Reno following Smart's split with Marilyn. So this guy D. Lake, the call that tipped that the remains could have been Tina's was from D. Lake's residence, and he just so happened to be a veteran who drove Smart to Reno right after the murders. What this is really weird. This is really weird. So the Mike Davis character, apparently this is the guy with Tony G. And just looking this stuff up, there were newspaper articles about these guys with their photos, so I guess they already have been publicly discussed. So Davis lived next door to the Sharp family. He moved out 2 weeks before the homicide. How coincidental. He said he did not know the Sharp family, but he saw the Sharp kids around but didn't associate with them. Curious. So, going back to the breakdown here, I thought the murders were mainly Loon's idea at the time. The tuna buy, the lies concocted by Marilyn, some Meeks, Sheila Sharp, and a few others. Tuna because expletive was a major factor. Richard Meeks and Dana were two of the guys screwing Sheila, and both thought the baby was theirs. Dale and Blaine were screwing Loon, and Dale wanted her as his out in the open instead of illicitly. Marilyn was doing everyone just to get what she wanted, a free pass through life. The tuna buy, with some blatant changes from the Luna buy, was meant to shift blame from the masterminds to the killer they all wanted under the bus, Marday. Sorry, Bo, your Chicago muscle means Jack in Plumas. You were just some wanker along for the ride. One of the key tenets of the Lunaby is that Marty or Bo got pissed off when the DJ changed the music from country to rock. Marty or Bo, depending on who told the lie and when it was told, got pissed off at the bartender Jack and stormed out. The fact that all three of them hammered this key plot point home is the first red flag that it's hogwash. The second is the story is so completely stupid. The third is none of them could keep straight who was pissed or how it went down. Gamberg first contacted me in October of 2014, 8 years after I started working the case as a hobby, and over 4 years since I began seriously investigating it and making major progress. We didn't start sincerely collaborating for many months, as I knew Mike was PCSO long before the murders, so I was suspicious that he was crooked like so many others in 81. I told Mike very early on, though, that the Lunaby is the easiest way to identify the killers. Anyone who parroted the Lunaby was involved in the murders or cleanup, and that the changing of the music at the bar both never happened and was aggressively not asked about by corrupt pigs. For whatever stupid reason, the killers felt they had to have an excuse for going from twirling on the dance floor all night to suddenly leaving the bar. However, there was no gain in this lie because anyone with a brain would have asked Jack the owner if the music changed, or ask Jan or Doug Albin who were sitting at the bar, or ask Eric the DJ. Instead, the one lie forced the corrupt cops to lie about so many obvious points of what a valid investigation would remotely resemble. Conspicuously not asking pertinent no-brainer basic detective 101 expletive is stamped all over this law enforcement cover-up conspiracy. Of course, none of these people were asked in 81. In fact, last summer, 2000, Jack Brown commented that I'd asked him more questions about the case in a few minutes than law enforcement did in all of his encounters with them. In fact, law enforcement didn't first speak with Jack until a full week had passed, almost a full week after Marty, Bo, and Loon had made such a stink about it to corrupt DOJ and corrupt PCSO. At about 1:10, the killers left the bar without any change in music as an excuse. They didn't make any major scene, no big stink, no argument, they just left. They returned home to 26, changed into denim work clothes, grabbed or gathered their kill kit, and descended upon the already darkened 28 with murder in mind. Their kill kit consisted of at least 3 rolls of white medical tape, 2 different lengths, 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch, several knives, Marty's expensive blue-handled hammer, and their Daisy 880 BB pellet rifle. It's duly noted in several documents that 28 had no such tape, no such rifle. Sheila and Rick were both asked. Also, Richard Meeks claimed to Sheila that Justin, at the Sharps group's funeral, said they had all kinds of medical tape and knives at 26. This is on file, yet no file exists of law enforcement asking the killers if they had access to anything used in the murders, much less the tape and knives. They apparently never even asked Richard or Justin about the claim of tape and knives at 26. I've read thousands of documents, and nearly every basic question that should have been asked, almost every line of inquiry one would logically take, wasn't. If they got a response they didn't like, they either buried their documentation or altered witness statements. So many documents were so blatantly falsified, the sheer audacity and sloth of their intentional miscarriage of justice would be utterly laughable were it not so ugly. We're talking about cops who rarely, if ever, typed anything. Yet so many documents are typed filled with obvious lies by law enforcement and unsigned that almost anything typed is immediately a suspect document. Descending on 28, Marty, Marilyn, and Bo entered through the unlocked front door. Since John's room was in the unconnected basement, and because burglary fears largely don't exist then in Keddie, the doors were left unlocked, even when nobody was home. As Sue had left the bathroom light on, they went straight to the far rear bedroom where Sue, Sheila, and Tina slept. This is a house Marty was very familiar with, as his great pal, Sheriff Doug Thomas, lived there just prior to the Sharps and had even let Marty live with him briefly. Whoa, 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 whoa. So, hold on a second. Martin Smart, not only is buddy with the sheriff who happened to live in cabin 28, where all these murders took place, but Marty lived with him in that very cabin for a period of time. If that's true, I mean, this just gets more and more mind-shocking. I mean, the coincidence stack is just, it's getting high. It's getting really high. They immediately went for Sue, most likely not noticing Tina asleep at the far end of the bed, at the far end of the room, some 10 feet away from their target victim. Sue slept in the twin bed immediately inside the bedroom door, and her daughters shared the queen. There was a space between the bed and the far wall so Tina could access her side of the bed, and then a throw rug lined the path between the beds. A TV tray served as a nightstand, which Sheila and Sue shared. It had Sheila's class reading assignment, Never Cry Wolf, on her side, with Sue's glasses and ever-present ashtray on her side. Between were an alarm clock and a cheap lamp. Sue was incredibly myopic, so she had the glasses on every waking minute. The mere fact she hadn't had time to put glasses on proves this was a planned surprise attack. Something unusual to this case is Tina's insecurities. There was a large piece of cardboard found on the lower part of her side, which was normally either blocking the window on the far wall or against the wall itself. This night, Tina slept with it on top of her, on top of the blanket. I believe it acted as her own security blanket because her brother mentioned she'd slept with it on top of her before. So either the killers were expecting Sheila in that bed, or they didn't notice it was Tina, or simply didn't notice Tina at all under the cardboard. They certainly noticed Tina when she awoke and screamed, because that was not part of their plan. Sheila, in on the planning and execution, would not have screamed, but she'd chickened out and wormed her way into replacing Tina at the sleepover next door. Tina screamed, perhaps Sue as well, but I have a feeling upon awakening, Sue knew her life was over, so she may not have screamed at all. Whatever the truth, the screams woke Justin, Rick, and Greg in the next room. They woke John and Dana sleeping downstairs. They woke the couple in house number 16. The girlfriend woke first, then nudged her partner awake. The screams seemed to come from the back of 28. The rear window was right next to Tina. Hearing no more screams, they noted the time on their digital clock, 1:15 a.m., and went back to sleep. The killers were suddenly dealing with Tina and Sue, with several others on their way into the fold. I believe Tina was dispatched first, either killed immediately or, as Marty said in one of his many confessions, she was incapacitated. It's noted, however, early on in his Sherlock series, Doyle had Holmes state that a dead person is certainly also incapacitated. Not enough of her remains were found in law enforcement's half-assed recovery operation from 1984 for any cause of death, but she may have been knocked unconscious throat slit, or even stabbed to death. Or, like Dana later, choked to death. However it was done, Tina was no longer screaming and certainly no threat. Nor were the boys in the next room with 3 armed adults they recognized and knew towering over them, threatening them into silence. However, John and Dana were bounding to the rescue, up the back steps and in through the kitchen. Again, 3 armed adults against 1 scrawny 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, it was no contest. And I mean no contest, no struggle, no fight. All 3 allowed themselves to be bound around the wrists with the medical tape, and there was no blood below any of the tape on the wrists. It's interesting to note only Dana, by far the strongest, was bound with the wider tape. This may have just been chance, but also points to more than one person taping the victims. Once bound, they'd essentially given their lives away. From then on, it was a torture and kill fest. The kill zone is something I figured out very early on from what few crime scene photos I was privy to. The main area of blood in the cabin was on the floor under and around the cushion found under Dana's head, and on the cushion itself. Both sides of the cushion were soaked through to the foam interior with multiple layers of blood from multiple victims. Therefore, whenever law enforcement from that era state they believed the cushion was used to comfort Dana, that he was given preferential treatment, and may have been involved, that person is either an idiot, a liar, probably both, or like the FBI's John Douglas was lied to. The reason Douglas's analysis and profile of the Keddie case is so off the mark is because he was fed lies. By PCSO, by DOJ certainly, and due my watching the 6-hour-plus interview with Loon by 2 FBI special agents in 2016, I know now the FBI were and remain actively involved in law enforcement's conspiracy to pervert justice. Again, once bound with tape, the systematic attacks began in earnest. Logic states Dana and John were dispatched next as they posed the biggest and only threats. Both were hammered in their heads and once unconscious on the ground were in turn worked over in the kill zone atop the cushion. Why was the cushion used? To comfort the victims? Hell no. To protect the killers. House 81 had cheap, thin, used carpet directly atop the wood floor, no padding. A hammer going into the head resting directly on top of the floor, it would act as a soundboard, notifying the world of what was happening in 28. No insulation under the house also meant the deep crawl space would act like a loudspeaker or echo chamber. The cushion was simply used to muffle the sounds of hammers and knives hitting bone. I mean, this is really dark. Oh, and why was the kill zone where it was? Because the light from the bathroom lit that little patch of the living room floor. That the bathroom light was left on was later verified by the person who gave John and Dana the ride home, who mentioned the dull glow emanating from the front window not only proved everyone was asleep and the bathroom light was left on, it proves this person really brought the boys home. All others are attention whores, liars, and or the killers themselves. While the killers smeared blood on most of the light switches and almost every doorknob, the killers usually only had the light from the bathroom Sue had left on, yet also at some point apparently turned on the closet light in the girls' room. It was left on with the closet door ajar. Were they just checking for more people? Why was only Sue gagged? Again, it was an orgy of overkill, but the main reason is while the killers dispatched the collateral damage as quickly as possible, Tina, Dana, and John were incapacitated nearly immediately, they also made sure Sue was a conscious witness to the depravity they unleashed. I mean, this is really dark. Of the 4, only Sue was able to scream. The gag began with her panties. A knife nick on her crotch indicates they were cut from her body, then shoved into her mouth. Some reports claim a bra was used, and the ME's autopsy reports are pathetic. Another fail is he simply mentions a woman's undergarment. Other reports claim a cowboy hatband was utilized, but this is patently false. As I posted on my forum years ago and likewise stated to Mike, the only logical answers to why the killers entered 28 with Justin sleeping the night is A, Justin was a plant, or B, they had no idea Justin was there. The answer is also obviously the latter, based on the evidence of how the murders went down and the fact that they forced Justin, and probably Rick, to get dirty. Many of the post-mortem wounds were clearly done by kids. Also, in the 6-hour interview with the FBI in 2016, a flustered Marilyn even blurted out they had no idea Justin was there that night. I mean, I don't know. This is the darkest. This might be the darkest theory in true crime I have ever read. They're saying they forced these kids to participate, as if that would keep them silent or something. I don't know. Once the boys were down, they went after Sue with a singular focus and vigor. She was punched, hit repeatedly with the barrel and butt of the rifle, and hit with such force the point sight of the tip of the barrel and the ramp sight near the stock were both ripped from the rifle, found by investigators on the living room carpet. The tip point left a perfectly shaped puncture wound below Sue's right eye. Several teeth were loose in their sockets, as were Dana's. Several of Dana's front teeth were broken off. I used to believe Sue may have been held up against the wall by the front door light switch and threatened with a knife, resulting in several cuts to her left ear, nearly severing it. Sue also had defensive wounds to the top of her left hand, somewhat consistent with someone trying to fend off the knife, but it's inconclusive. I now believe all of this happened while she was on the floor, over near her place, during and after the murders, at the foot of the couch, always propped up for a perfect view of what was happening in the kill zone. The stab wounds to her ear also cut off several chunks of hair, and all of them I've located appeared between the foot of the couch and the kill zone, indicated she was likely on the floor at the time her ear was repeatedly sliced and nearly severed. In the 10 to 15 minutes that elapsed since the killers first entered 28, I believe both Tina and Dana, certainly Dana, were dead, and Johnny was knocked unconscious, slowly dying by hammer wounds, which left his swelling brain oozing through his skull. By 1:30, Bo and Marty realized they needed to bust ass back to the bar to reestablish their alibi, leaving Loon behind at 28 to guard Sue and the younger boys. Marty and Bo went back to 26, cleaned what blood off that they could see, switched back into the disco duds so quickly they didn't put their vests on, as Bo needlessly pointed out in his sole interview, and made a phone call. This phone call is another point of the alibi they stressed so loudly that it both must be a lie and true. They did not get a call from, nor did they call Jack Brown at the bar, as they have variously claimed. There was no kiss and make up with Jack because the music never changed. Jack told me A, he didn't give an expletive about Marty, B, he had no clue what Marty's phone number was, C, had Marty or anyone else complained about the music, Jack would have kicked their ass out of his bar. I believe they did call someone, and worried law enforcement would pull their records. Law enforcement should have, yet didn't. Were afraid records would show a local call was made at 1:30 a.m. Back then, a call from Keddie, 6 miles south to Quincy, was a toll call. And all long-distance numbers are probably logged. This means they made a local call. Of all the people Bo and Marilyn would bring into the fold mid-murder, and of all the suspects believed to be involved in the murders, the top two a-holes are DJ Lake and Tony G. Both local calls from Keddie. Both are certainly guilty of playing parts in the murders, at least the awkward cover-up. D's car was noted as being parked at 26 Sunday morning, but we don't yet know when he arrived. I believe D was called by Marty telling him expletive was out of control at 28 and to get his ass over there. Back at the bar, witnesses noticed Bo seemed distant and agitated when they returned. Bo Bede, of course, had mafia ties and despite being of French descent, tried to pass himself off as Italian. Marty tried to act normal but appeared nervous. Referring to Bo, he was heard to say, "There's nothing worse than a mad dago." While Marty and Bo were back at the bar, imagine the kind of abuse her main enemy and the instigator of the murders volleyed upon Sue. After a couple more drinks, the bar closed and they went back to 26, switched back into their murder garb, then stealthily made it back to 28. They assessed the damage done and decided on the next steps. By this point, Dana was already dead and laying on his back, blood settling on his posterior as livor mortis set in. Tina was also either already dead or they finished her off. John was still alive, hopefully still unconscious for what he was to come. But Sue was wide awake, propped up against the couch, overlooking the dead, awaiting her next turn of abuse. Whether or not the plan had been to kill everyone in the cabin, the fact that they'd killed Tina and Dana and mortally wounded John means they would likely have polished off the other two boys, Greg and Rick, had Justin's presence not surprised them. Were John and Dana not supposed to be at 28 that night as well? Because if they had left before and they couldn't get a ride back, was it kind of assumed or reported on by certain neighbors, whoever were guilty, if they were guilty, that they weren't there at the time? So the plan, wow, that is curious, because that's a big mess that maybe, that would explain a couple things. The crime scene indicates the killers were surprised by John and Dana coming to the rescue. If they expected John and or Dana to be home, why did they not first sneak into John's downstairs room and take him or them out of the picture? No, Marty and Bo were most certainly under the impression their sole target was Sue. I believe they thought they could get in, do whatever damage was necessary, and get the hell out, with Sue being the sole victim. Evidence indicates those in 26 did not know Justin was at 28, that Sheila sent Tina home to 28 while hiding at the Seabolts, and that nobody involved in the murder conspiracy, Sheila, 26, the Meeks, knew Dana had any intention of staying at 28 that night. In fact, John often spent Friday and Saturday nights in Quincy rather than at home. So that is at least 3 and possibly 4 people the killers did not expect to be at 28, and all of the 4, except the killer's child, Justin, paid with their lives. See, in any kind of true crime case, I always look at what's out of the ordinary, because there's a lot of things out of the ordinary here. Like Sheila, who never stays over at the Seabolt, and Tina, who usually does. Now they swap places randomly. Never before done. And then also John's usually not there, so Dana wouldn't be expected there either. Oh, man. This is a lot. I mean, this is a lot. Whatever the plan, whatever the intended kill count, they came with enough weapons and rolls of tape to prove they were prepared for killing everyone in the house the moment they walked in. Justin kept ruining everything, yet Loon still made the mistake of sparing her firstborn son's life. I don't understand why, because she loathed him. He'd spent his entire life being ping-ponged between her, his biological dad, and other relatives. About the only thing he was good for was being tormented, an object of the very least, at the very least, her mental abuse. I'm certain Marilyn regretted not killing Justin and others, making it a clean sweep, because his very existence is proof she and Marty actively participated in the murders. Law enforcement also knew that they saw everyone present in 28. Blood on the boys' bedroom door and both inside and outside doorknobs, blood smeared on the interior bedroom wall, blood on the light switch. Greg also revealed multiple times that he was awake, even that he saw everything. Of course, Justin told many versions of his witnessing the murders, yet law enforcement completely buried that and lied about it for 30 plus years. To my knowledge, Rick has never publicly acknowledged witnessing his family being slaughtered, but he certainly did see and hear it. Justin, of course, is notorious for how many times his story changed, but he not only witnessed the murders, but the location where his DNA was found proves he was directly involved in the murders. Years ago, Mike G gave me permission to reveal his DNA was the hit mentioned in news articles. DNA matches that of a living suspect. In fact, when the money ran out and the case was again mothballed, 2018, Mike told me I can tell everything. He doesn't give an expletive what gets out there, which again points to what his wife Linda said about the case when I first met up with the Gambergs in July 2020. This case was intentionally contaminated from day one. They expletived it up so bad, there's no way it can ever be prosecuted. Wait a second. Mike Gamberg, the investigator? That's his... Wait, what? No. Okay, so this is poorly phrased. Mike Gamberg is saying that... Is this Rick's DNA here? This is really poorly phrased. Mike G gave me permission to reveal his DNA was the hit mentioned. So this is Rick's DNA. Or is this Justin's? Justin is notorious for how many times his story changed. Yeah, so this is Justin. Wow, so Justin Smart's DNA is there? So he's 12 at the time? This is crazy. I mean, this is really crazy. Mike told me when he first called Justin in and dropped the bombshell of the DNA hit, placing him as directly involved, he slumped and said, expletive, I was wondering when that was going to come back to bite me in the ass. When I first revealed Justin's DNA hit, Justin was in contact with me via email Mondo Pronto, requesting I remove any mention of him and that the DNA rumor was untrue. Boy, you should read those emails. They're tragic comedy at its best. I keep my word, but as he never even requested, I keep our correspondence private. Here they are. Okay, so a bunch of these emails with a lot of expletives. Okay. So basically, Keddie 28 is telling him he can tell his side of the story. It's the truth, and you expletive well know it. This is the response to the request for the takedown of information. I was kind to not mention the DNA, huh? Feel free to post your side of the story, but take a lesson from what we did to your idiot mom. Wow, this guy's not polite. If you try to pass lies off to us, we will eviscerate you. So many of her lies are ridiculously stupid, such as her claim she and Marty stayed in the tiny room north of the kitchen and gave you and Casey the master bedroom. Did you see how she went down in flames when she joined our mass chat last year, right after Marty's hammer was pulled from the pond? One lie after another, truly a pathetic excuse for a human being. Here's the highlights if you missed the show. Wow, this is really messed up. So she joined the chat right after the hammer was pulled from the pond from down the street. I mean, he just goes over a lot of stuff about apparently to reestablish the alibi at the bar. That wasn't part of the original plan, but when there were screams heard or whatever, things didn't go according to plan. They decided to go back and reestablish the alibi. Oh man, this is weird. So the youngest boys, but not Justin, were known to be there by the killers, and Loon made the mistake of sparing Justin's life. So how could they leave Justin alive and kill the rest? Big problem, they couldn't. They couldn't take Justin home with them when they were done killing all 7. Just because they were selfish a-holes who had no clue or care where their kids were, too many others would come out of the woodwork to say they knew Justin went to bed with the rest of the dead and woke up alive at 26. So all the boys in that room had to survive for them to spare Justin's life. I don't say this lightly. Despite Justin being a complete piece of expletive as a human being, Rick and Greg have only his presence at 28 that night to thank for their lives. So the killers relied on standard tools. They threatened the surviving boys with their own lives, since if you don't keep quiet, we'll come back and kill your family was already playing out in the living room. It was verbal and quite physical threats against them. The boys remained in the bedroom, scared expletive. Okay, so they didn't force those younger boys to be involved, just Justin. I guess that's his theory here. The killers, I figure, didn't leave until around 4 a.m., perhaps as late as 4:30. So Marty would punctuate his threats by throwing a knife into the wall, separating the boys' room from the kill zone. This went on often enough that the boys retreated to hide in the closet for hours. The killers realized this, so Marty shifted his knife throwing to the wall near the door, which separated the living room from the bedroom closet. Once the boys were dealt with and the overall situation assessed, the killers determined it was best to try to point away from Sue as the target. As it stood, Sue had the expletive kicked out of her, whereas the dying and dead were in much better shape, even in death. So they would eventually finish John off in a particularly brutal fashion and then abuse both bodies horribly. Sue hadn't been finished off yet, and they had to figure out what to do with Tina's body. I think Marty balked at abusing Tina's corpse. Speaking of Tina in the confession to his therapist is the only time he showed any emotion. So rather than defiling Tina's body, they decided to remove it. This not only would shift the focus to Tina as the target, but also Tina as perhaps willing participant. I initially felt they took Tina because she was the lightest, and slogging any literal dead weight 6/10 of a mile would be a pain in the ass for these cowards, but in his therapist's multiple tellings of Marty's confession have convinced me Marty couldn't bring himself to defile Tina's corpse. Marty told Krim and Bradley, the corrupt DOJ agents, that the best way to get Tina out of Keddie was over the swinging bridge, except he lied. That was locked. This is one of the few times PCSO DOJ made the mistake of checking Marty's story. The bridge was unlocked. Lisa and Doug decided to forget about their significant others and sleep together that Saturday night. Doug lived on the other side of the swinging bridge and walked over it around midnight to go to the back door. At closing, Doug and Lisa walked over the bridge together, going to his house. In the morning, Lisa walked back over the bridge to retrieve her car from the bar. Law enforcement did a horrible job of covering this up. All initial reports have them going over the bridge back and forth with no issue. Then a re-interview with pops up, claiming he was furious that the bridge was locked when he and Lisa tried to go to his house at 2 a.m. and that they had to climb over the gate. Then pops up a report of an interview with the guy who supposedly installed the gate, where the report claims he said he had the only keys and the gate was always locked. A few problems with Marty's and law enforcement's lies. 1, there is a gate with a lock on both sides of the bridge. 2, it is impossible to climb over either gate, some 40 to 50 feet off the ground because of the barriers built around the gates. Only a soon-to-be-dead fool would even attempt. 3, law enforcement were too lazy to destroy initially filled reports in which Lisa and Doug had no problems crossing the bridge many times. In September 2015, I compiled for Gamberg a list of all the times I knew of the bridge being mentioned by Doug, Lisa, Marty, Loon, etc., Marilyn. Of course, it is the one who said, Justin said, look for Tina down by the river. Justin has never recalled saying this, just that my mom says I said. Marilyn knew Marty and Bo took Tina out 28's back door, down to the river, and across the unlocked bridge, probably hiding Tina's body in a gully across the 2-lane Highway 70. But not before Marty went through the girl's closet. This is probably why the closet light was on, retrieved the slinky pink pantsuit he'd bought for pseudo-wear, and took it with him. While on the bridge, he threw the garment wrapped in a rock downriver into Spanish Creek. Imagine how the garment pissed off Loon. Those in 26 are broke. Marty's been fired, they're being evicted, and here's proof Marty was spending money on the whore he was shagging. I wanted Mike to look into what I saw to be a lie about the bridge being locked. Marty made a point to bring it up and shoot it down in his interview as one of only a couple ways to get Tina's body out of Keddie. I wanted Mike to see Marty lied. A lot of people lied about the bridge, and that it was likely Tina's corpse was removed from Keddie that way, long before the crimes were discovered by Sheila. Mike did look into them. Lisa was long dead, but was around, and Mike found the contradictory documents filed about the bridge being locked. Doug got pissed. Those expletive liars, I never said that. I could never crawl over that gate if it was locked. Nobody could. Removal of Tina and return to 28 would take 30 to 40 minutes easily. This would put Marty and Bo back in the crime scene around 3 a.m., quite a slog. I would imagine they took a break. Throughout the murder process, victims were taken to the kill zone and attacked, then left there until the decision was made to work on someone else. Sue, made to witness everything, was almost always propped up at the foot of the couch, but the others would be moved around with an arc of evenly spaced bleed-out spots leading from the kill zone to the far corner of the living room. Johnny was still alive, and to kill him, his throat was gouged, causing an arc of blood spray on the carpet just outside the main kill zone blood pools. He was then carried at head and feet to where he was finally staged. Dana, still on his back, was turned onto his stomach and placed on the cushion, his eyes facing Sue. His head was then bludgeoned into a pulp with a leg ripped from the folding card table and or the rifle barrel. 4 full-force whacks crushing the left side of his skull to the core, nearly bouncing his head completely off the cushion. The killers then grabbed the extension cord and quickly and ridiculously, stupidly tied Dana's feet to John's. This staging is so blatant and poorly executed, anyone who claims this was not planned and staged, that the victims were bound by wire while alive, is either an idiot or an idiotic liar. A blood map I made indicates the kill zone where the bodies were found, where the blood spray from John's kill blow neck wound was under where Dana's legs were placed, where bleed out spots were, etc. The same floor plan blood map was used to indicate the approximate direction of the 4 post-mortem blows to Dana's head. The rifle barrel, or most likely the table leg, were used to deliver the crushing strikes. The killers showed the standard organized, disorganized traits, with blood smears in basically every upstairs room, but they somehow managed to keep the traipsing blood footprints all over the house, mainly by the way they controlled blood flow and bleed out in the kill zone. Another point about the lividity in Sheriff Thomas would take all comers when it came to destroying or tainting evidence. Not only was he poisoning the well with his hypnotism on valid witnesses, he'd have his team waste countless hours with psychics. Wow, I haven't heard that before in a case. So did he know Justin was fully awake and involved, and he wanted to cast doubt on his testimony, so that's why he brought in the hypnotist and the inexperienced sketch artist? Wow, that's curious. And I mean, right out of the gate, most investigations wouldn't stoop so low as to listen to these frauds until months after all reasonable leads had dried up, but Sly Thomas was himself an unreasonable fraud. He sought out psychics almost as immediately as he called in those criminal frauds from the DOJ, Harry Bradley, and Prince Albert Krim. PCSO would also routinely feed these psycho fraudster psychics information, even showing them crime scene photos from which to springboard their ridiculous fantasies. One saw or heard of the lividity on Dana and proclaimed that blanching on Dana's buttocks indicated he died tied to a chair. Donna Williams, one of the dumbest and worst liars who tried to insinuate her way into the case in infamy, also heard and spread this lie. In turn, Don Stoy filed an update report in '83 in which he claimed the blanching clearly suggested Dana died in a semi or upright position, buttocks free of lividity as if it was in contact with a hard surface, i.e. chair. Don is a dim bulb himself, so he must have come to this conclusion by taking the word of the fraud psychic and or the addict loser liar. Blood breaks down upon death, separating into a clotting glue and a clear serum. The spray and splatter from the post-mortem headshots to Dana also prove staging. The fact Dana's down vest, which John was wearing, was splayed out below his shoulders, proved both staging and presence of at least 2 killers, one at the head, the other carrying John at his feet. He had to be completely aloft from the ground, not dragged, for this vest to splay out as it had. I don't believe and desperately hope the killers brought the surviving boys into the crime scene until all were dead, and also hope they were only forced to do post-mortem damage. So this leaves Sue being finished off first. She was forced to bear the indignation of being paraded around the room, certainly being taunted by these a-holes. See what you made us do. See the mess you made. Happy with yourself now, expletive. Blood was all over the soles of her feet, the soaked carpet squeezing blood up between her toes. This was most likely Loon and Marty each taking a shoulder and walking her around the room through bleed-out spots, as Sue wouldn't or couldn't do it on her own. I mean, this is quite a detailed theory spun here. Back in her spot by the couch, down on her back, she was straddled by Marty, face to face, 3 stab wounds to the chest, tightly grouped around the center line and just above the breasts, then the coup de grace, using the knife to push the bottom of her bra up. What appears to be a hesitation wound is made, then a horizontal slice at the bottom of the breast just below the areola. The space between her ribs was located before thrusting in the blade 5.5 inches deep, puncturing the lower lobe of the left lung and destroying the left pleural cavity. As her lung collapsed, the cavity filled with blood, suffocating her. Due to the position and direction of the wound to her neck, I believe Marilyn knelt beside Sue's left shoulder and stabbed her. The wound was horizontal to Sue's body and pierced her larynx, esophagus, and nicked her spine. Seeing as it was impossible to hobble Sue around the room or straddle her to finish her off, she clearly could have only been bound by wire after death. Cords were cut from appliances such as the lamp from the nightstand in the girls' room. At least 2 separate appliance cords were used. Sue's ankles were tied incredibly tightly, then her wrists. Then those bindings were tied tightly together anteriorly, so her hands and ankles were cinched closely together. Sue's hands pulled down between her legs, her terry cloth nightie was pulled up to expose her genitals, and she was placed on her back, head up against the base of the couch, staged for Dana to appear to be staring at her crotch. The introduction of the kids could have happened before they staged Sue, but at least Justin and Ricky, but likely not 5-year-old Greg, were forced to get dirty. I believe the crushing of Dana's skull was so forceful it was beyond the strength of Justin, but again, DNA proves he was involved directly at some point. Several wounds certainly were or could have been post-mortem. A pellet was fired from the rifle, one pellet recovered. Morgue photos show a wound to Sue and a wound to Dana not listed by the lazy-ass pathologist, which are both consistent with a pellet wound, which could also be post-mortem. A throat wound to Sue may have also been post-mortem by either Rick or Justin. Many other wounds may have been post-mortem, but the absolute clincher, proving forced involvement by the kids, are the half-assed stab wounds to John's chest. 3 shallow stab wounds which could not penetrate John's ribcage. Definitely done by a child. Unlike the stab through Sue's chest's ribs done by an adult who knew where to stab, and also to put the knife horizontally between ribs, the 3 wounds on John are vertical. Also, they were definitely post-mortem, as the wounds went through his jogging suit and shirt, but not the vest. So John was already staged on his back, the vest spread wide open by gravity when he was carried completely aloft before being lowered into place. The wounds were grouped there where the vest was already splayed away from his body, post-mortem period. The huge butcher knife was not used to kill anyone, as none of the wounds could have been created by it. The knife that was used on John's chest proves kids being forced to get dirty all over again. Instead of using the murder knife, which the killers brought and took with them, the boys used another knife from the kitchen drawer, a cheap, flimsy, serrated table steak knife. Dime store cheap. Again, the knife may have been strong enough and is roughly the right size to cause the wound in Sue's neck, but I believe that wound wasn't caused by a serrated blade. However, it was used on John, by a child who didn't know what he was doing and didn't want to do it. And the flimsy knife bent on the 3rd try and was tossed away abandoned. That's why the knife was found bent and discarded inches from John's chest. I have to say, I mean, this theory does account for a lot of these problematic details, like why certain things were taken from the cabin and some were not. Because if the real killers wanted to take their own weapons to not incriminate themselves, yet they couldn't care less about the others, I mean, I don't know, it's really weird. A huge and obvious fact most miss amidst law enforcement's 30 years of lies, they claimed it was a crime of opportunity, that all weapons came from inside 28. Yet Justin admitted the 2 men brought weapons and tape. And of course, the autopsies proved neither knife found at the scene could have caused the knife wounds to at least Sue. Yeah, and let's not overlook the pellet rifle they brought. Also, the knife in the general store just down the street as well, just yards away. I mean, this is also mind-shocking. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. This is one of the most bizarre crimes ever. I mean, hands down, after looking at all these details. Once the boys were thoroughly dirty and silenced to the killer's satisfaction, they were sent back to their room. Marilyn, Marty, and Bo gathered up what they could see, the remnants of their kill kit and anything else they could find which they needed to remove, dumping it into John's wooden toolbox and taking it and the remains of the rifle home. After being in 26 for some time, I believe Marty went to the dumpster by the dorm and placed some evidence. Twisted and bloody tissues, pre-DNA testing, a damaged Swiss Army type of knife. This was meant to leave a blood trail away from 26, but from 28 directly down to the only road out of town. Oh, so that would, again, I mean, this theory does seem to make sense of a lot of these details. Back in 28, Justin and Rick waited until they were sure the killers weren't coming back. Still using the bathroom light in the pre-dawn hours, they moved Sue from the horrible sexually humiliating pose and covered her with the top sheet and blanket off of Sue's bed. By this time, Sue was in full rigor, which is why her left leg is aloft, hanging mid-air. It's also what proves her body was moved by someone other than the killer. Whoever posed her would not have undone that. These idiots, despite wanting to make it look like Sue was not the target, undid all that post-mortem abuse and staging by again making Sue posed in death the obvious central focus and target of the killers. I say Rick and Justin did this because Rick would have had more impetus to give Sue some respect in death. Also, moving Sue's rigid corpse would have been exponentially awkward and difficult compared to a flexible dead weight. Sue was somehow rotated onto her right side and pushed further against the couch. This, in turn, knocked that corner of the couch some 3 inches back until it was against the wall, unable to budge further. This was no ordinary couch, but a 1970s fold-out, which weighed a ton. I doubt either Justin or Rick alone could have shifted both Sue and the couch without working together. Again, proof Rick, like the rest, was never asleep after 1:15 a.m. Next up is the discovery of the bodies by their murderer, Sheila Sharp. Sheila, probably anxious as hell, woke early like a child on Christmas Day. Nobody else at the Seabolts was awake, but as soon as they began to stir, Sheila made her excuse to go next door to see the results of their plan put to action. This took a few days to write, so give me some time to do a write-up on the intentional perversion of justice, which followed. Wow. I mean, this is just so stunningly mind-shocking. I really don't know what to make of it. I mean, they also have quite a few write-ups here on the timelines, which we'll get to in the next episode. But I just wanted to read one more testimony if the plot isn't thick enough for everybody. On the true crime subreddit, there's Keddie Cabin's post here that is supposedly by a friend of this poster's mother. This was just posted a year ago or so. I first heard about this case from a friend of my mother's. Her name was Lana, and she claimed she was friends with Tina, and she knew exactly who committed these murders because she was there. She spoke with police the day they found the bodies, but they do not listen to her. Apparently, Tina and her were in the same class, and one of their teachers would inappropriately pay extra attention to Tina. He also sold marijuana to some of the teenage boys who were involved in this case, so according to this woman's story, she was there that night. She heard the struggle happening and saw the teacher. She ran out the door and down a road which was slanted downhill, apparently. As she was running, she heard the car coming down the road very quickly and panicked, thinking they were after her. But they shot past her down the road with Tina screaming from the back seat. According to her story, she spoke with police and federal police, but they continued to try to get her to change her story, eventually telling her she must be confused. None of her reports are ever mentioned in the stuff they released to the media, which leaves room for reasonable doubt. But in my opinion, she was telling the truth. I don't know anyone who could fake the amount of fear and terror I saw on her face and in her voice as she told me what she saw that night. I know from the rest of her family and records that they lived in the exact area around the time. So it's been something that has always stuck with me, and I figured that I would just put that theory out there for people to do what they will do. To add to my earlier comment, I went digging and found a Reddit post by a user which said this. Investigators then turned their attention to Tina, who at that point still hadn't been found. Tina was her teacher's pet. Joel Walker Lipsey was a special ed teacher at Tina's school, and she attended his class part-time. Authorities found it extremely creepy that he kept a picture of Tina on his desk and even had a photo displayed in his home. To make matters worse, Joel was a convicted child molester. California court documents indicate he had been convicted of lewd or lascivious acts with a child under 14. If this isn't suspicious, plus the fact they covered up Lana's testimony, they had an eyewitness. They were covering up the fact that they had a sex offender working with children and now had someone who could prove that he did it again. So, I mean, just the layers of this case, I mean, this is just really crazy. Also, just a further point in the previous theory when we went over on Keddie28.com, supposedly, here's a post here also referencing that Sheila, the daughter, set up the murders with the Meeks and Marilyn. Sheila then turned off the outside lights and unscrewed the porch bulb so 28 would be dark for the killers to enter. The bulb was found unscrewed by PCSO, and her fingerprints were on the bulb. Marilyn set up Marty and Bo and committed the murders with them. Then she, the Meeks, and Sheila all pointed to Marty and Bo as the killers. So, I mean, this is all really, really shocking stuff. And the rabbit holes in this case, actually, I mean, they are very, very far-reaching. I mean, there's some other rabbit holes and curiosities here regarding Gamberg, who Mike Gamberg, the one who taught both Johnny and Dana martial arts, and who said Dana had been at his house the day before he died, but didn't say why. Because I mean, how old was this guy? I mean, I guess he wasn't that much older, but some people allege that that Dana was Gamberg's CI regarding a few things, and there was some overlap, and that's why Gamberg wasn't allowed in the investigation. Now, that doesn't mean there wasn't a whole bunch of corruption and all this other insanity going on at the same time, but they're saying that that's another wrinkle in the case here. Also, I mean, there's other issues too. Supposedly, that psychiatrist that said that Marty told him that he killed Tina using a hammer. Supposedly, the skull that they found, there is no damage from the hammer. I mean, this is allegedly. Again, we don't know what they have, or if it was even the decomposition was so severe they wouldn't have been able to tell, even if there was. So truly a baffling case. And I mean, there's a lot here. There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of shady people with shady stories. I mean, how to rectify all of it? It's quite difficult. But we will do our best here on Mindshock. All the Mindshock listeners that have been following the case for a while, feel free to chime in with your thoughts, theories, suggestions, rebuttals, or debunkings in the comment section. And I hope you guys enjoyed another edition of Mindshock True Crime. If you enjoyed the podcast, find it interesting and informative, feel free to donate to our PayPal. Help us create more mind-shocking content with logic and reason at the forefront, and keep up awareness in these cases that are still unsolved. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.